They invited the class ugly girl to the reunion to mock her, but she arrived like a goddess with a billionaire by her side. Everyone at that reunion thought they were about to laugh at the broken girl they once bullied. But when she walks in, glowing, powerful, unrecognizable, the whole room freezes. What they don't know is the truth she's been hiding. The truth behind why she looked the way she did in school, and the silent billionaire who refuses to leave her side. But just when her old classmates think she came back for revenge, something far darker comes to light. A homeless teenager stealing food, a mother hiding in the shadows, and a past that refuses to stay buried. Now the girl they once mocked faces an impossible choice: expose the people who destroyed her, or save the child who's living the same nightmare she once survived. But when the past and present collide, will she finally rise? Or will the truth destroy everything she's built? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting gentle shadows across Lila Hayes' pristine white kitchen counter. Steam rose from her favorite ceramic mug, the earthy aroma of chamomile tea filling the peaceful space of her Los Angeles apartment. Though modest in size, the home reflected her artistic soul: clean lines mixed with soft textures, and carefully chosen pieces that spoke of quiet elegance rather than flashy wealth. Padding across the hardwood floors in her silk robe, Lila paused at the soft whisper of paper sliding beneath her door. Her heart skipped. Mail didn't usually arrive this early. Setting down her tea, she crossed to the entrance, where a single gold envelope lay on the floor like a dropped piece of sunlight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. The paper was expensive, thick and textured. No return address, just her name in flowing calligraphy. Breaking the seal, she pulled out a heavy cardstock invitation, and her world tilted sideways. "Join us for Westbrook High's 10-year reunion," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. But it was the handwritten note below that made her stomach clench. "Don't forget to come back, our ugly duckling. We're all dying to see how you turned out." The mug slipped from her other hand, tea splashing across the floor. Lila barely noticed. She was 16 again, huddled in the corner of an abandoned warehouse, trying to stay warm in clothes she'd worn for weeks. The whispers and sneers of her classmates echoed in her ears. "She smells like garbage. Look at those nasty clothes. Guess the dumpster didn't have anything better." Lila's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, the golden invitation crushed in her fist. She'd built herself up from nothing, created a brand known worldwide for its innovation and elegance. But she'd done it all from behind a curtain of anonymity, letting her work speak while she stayed hidden. Now this invitation threatened to drag her back into the light, back into the pain she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The morning slipped away as she paced her apartment, the invitation lying accusingly on her coffee table. Her usual calm precision fractured, leaving her thoughts scattered like broken glass. By early afternoon, she couldn't take the solitude anymore. With shaking fingers, she picked up her phone and dialed the one person who knew all her secrets. "Ethan?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I need to talk." "I'll clear my schedule." Ethan Reyes replied without hesitation, his warm tone already steadying her nerves. "Come for dinner. 6 o'clock?" Hours later, Lila sat in Ethan's penthouse dining room, the Los Angeles skyline twinkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The invitation lay between them on the glass table like a loaded weapon. Ethan watched her with patient eyes as she pushed her barely touched salmon around her plate. "They found me," she finally said, her voice small. "After all these years of keeping my identity private, they found me anyway. And they're still..." She swallowed hard. They're still cruel. Ethan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. His presence had always been like a shelter in a storm, solid, unwavering, safe. The question isn't whether they're still cruel, he said gently. It's whether you're still letting their cruelty define you. I built this whole life around hiding, Lila whispered, gesturing to the city lights beyond the window. My designs are everywhere, but no one knows my face. I thought that was strength, but maybe... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Maybe it was protection. Ethan finished for her. His dark eyes held understanding rather than judgment. There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself, Lila, but there comes a point where protection becomes prison. You've built something extraordinary from the ashes of your past. Perhaps it's time to step into that truth fully. Tears pricked at Lila's eyes. I don't know if I can face them. Face those memories. You're not that scared teenager anymore. Ethan reminded her softly. You're a woman who transformed her pain into beauty, who helps other young women find their way out of similar circumstances. The question isn't whether you can face them, it's whether you're ready to let them see who you've become. Later that night, Lila lay in her bed, staring at the golden invitation on her nightstand. Moonlight caught its edges, making them glow. Each time she closed her eyes, memories flickered behind her eyelids. The bitter cold of winter, nights spent homeless, the ache of constant hunger, the burning shame of walking into school in dirty clothes. But now other images rose too. Her first successful design, the scholarship she'd earned to fashion school, the foundation she'd started to help homeless youth. The invitation seemed to pulse with possibility and danger, a key that could either lock her deeper into her past or finally free her from it. Sleep eluded her as she watched it, knowing that whatever choice she made come morning would ripple through every careful wall she'd built around her life. Change was coming, whether she welcomed it or not. The early morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Los Angeles as Lila made her way to her design studio. The building's plain exterior gave no hint of the creative powerhouse within, exactly as she'd planned it. She pressed her palm against the biometric scanner, hearing the soft click of the secure door unlocking. Inside, the space was already alive with the gentle whir of sewing machines and the rustle of fabric. Her small hand-picked team of 15 trusted employees looked up as she entered, offering warm smiles. These were the only people in the fashion world who knew her face, who understood the woman behind the celebrated brand. Good morning, everyone, Lila said softly, managing a smile despite her churning thoughts. She made her way to her private workspace, a sun-filled corner office with walls of inspiration boards and sketches. The golden envelope from yesterday seemed to burn in her bag, demanding attention she couldn't afford to give it. Spreading out her latest sketches for the Paris showcase, Lila tried to lose herself in the familiar comfort of her work. Her fingers traced the delicate lines of an evening gown design, but her mind kept wandering back to those cruel high school hallways. The precise pencil strokes blurred before her eyes. Ms. Hayes. Maya, her assistant of 3 years, appeared in the doorway with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. I brought your morning tea, and the fabric samples from Milan just arrived. Thank you, Maya. Lila accepted the cup, grateful for the warmth between her palms. Maya lingered, concern evident in her expression. Is everything all right? You seem distracted today. Lila forced another smile. Just tired. Could you bring in those fabric samples? We need to finalize the selections for Paris. For the next several hours, Lila threw herself into work with desperate intensity. She reviewed countless swatches of silk and chiffon, adjusted hemlines during fittings, and refined embroidery patterns until her eyes ached. But the reunion invitation haunted her like a persistent shadow. coloring every decision, every interaction. During a fitting with their lead model, Lila found herself staring blankly at a pinned sleeve, lost in memories of wearing the same donated sweater for months straight. The model shifted uncertainly. "Ms. Hayes, should we adjust the gathering at the shoulder?" Lila blinked, forcing herself back to the present. "Yes, sorry, let's take it in slightly here." Her hands moved automatically, pins gliding through the luxurious fabric. How far she'd come from those days of patched clothes and empty stomachs, yet somehow the distance felt paper-thin. The afternoon sun was painting golden streaks across her sketches when a familiar figure appeared in her doorway. Ethan Reyes filled the frame with his tall presence, perfectly tailored suit unable to hide his athletic build. His expression was gentle but determined. "Taking a break anytime soon?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Lila sighed, setting down her pencil. "I have too much work to do, Ethan. The Paris showcase is in 3 weeks. Which is exactly why you need fresh eyes." He crossed to her desk, studying the scattered sketches. "These are brilliant, as always. But you're not fully here today, are you?" She looked away, unable to meet his knowing gaze. "I'm fine. Come walk with me," he said softly. It wasn't a command, but Lila found herself standing anyway. She followed him through the studio, past the curious glances of her team, and into the private courtyard she'd designed as a peaceful retreat. The setting sun painted the space in warm copper tones as they settled onto a bench beneath a flowering jasmine vine. For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence. "You've spent 10 years building something extraordinary," Ethan finally said, his voice low and earnest. "Not just the designs, but the foundation, the mentoring programs, the scholarships. You've changed lives, Lila, but you've done it all from behind a curtain." "The work speaks for itself," she murmured, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "It does, but imagine how many more people you could inspire by stepping into the light. Those kids you help, don't you think they'd draw strength from seeing someone who truly understands their struggle? Someone who rose from similar circumstances to build an empire?" Lila plucked nervously at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Or they'd see someone who was so ashamed of her past that she hid for a decade." "No." Ethan's voice was firm. "They'd see someone brave enough to finally embrace her whole story. This reunion, it's not just about facing your old classmates, it's about facing yourself." The truth of his words settled into her chest like a weight. The jasmine's sweet scent wrapped around them as the sky deepened to purple. "I'll go with you," Ethan said quietly. "If you decide to attend, you don't have to face this alone." They walked to his car in the fading light, their footsteps echoing off the empty streets. The city was transitioning from its workday bustle to evening energy, lights beginning to twinkle in office windows. "Let's grab dinner," Ethan suggested. "That little cafe you like is just around the corner." Over bowls of pasta at the intimate neighborhood restaurant, they talked about everything except the reunion, design challenges, foundation projects, industry gossip. But as Lila twirled strands of linguine around her fork, she found her mind wandering to possibilities instead of fears. What would it feel like to walk into that reunion with her head held high, to finally let the world see the woman she'd become? Later that night, lying in bed, Lila stared at her ceiling as moonlight painted patterns across it. The terror that had gripped her yesterday was still there, but it had shifted somehow. It felt less like a weight pressing her down and more like the nervous energy before a runway show. Frightening, yes, but also thrilling. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows. She rolled onto her side, watching the city lights twinkle beyond her window. The question that had seemed so impossible yesterday now felt different. Was she strong enough to show up as herself? For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine walking into that reunion with her head high, Ethan's steady presence beside her. The image didn't fill her with dread anymore. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope. Dawn crept through Lila's bedroom window, finding her already awake. She'd barely slept, but for once, it wasn't anxiety keeping her up. It was electricity humming through her veins. Her hand reached for her phone before she could second-guess herself. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Good morning, Lila." "I'm going," she said, her voice steady. "To the reunion. But I want to do it right. I want to show them exactly who I've become." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I was hoping you'd say that. Come to my office. We'll plan everything." 2 hours later, Lila sat in Ethan's sleek corner office, surrounded by mood boards and sketches. The Los Angeles skyline stretched out behind them through floor-to-ceiling windows. "The gown," Lila said, pulling out her tablet. "I've been saving this one." She turned the screen toward Ethan, revealing a design that made even the seasoned fashion mogul catch his breath. The dress was a masterpiece of Black Renaissance inspiration, layers of silk charmeuse in deep midnight blue, overlaid with crystalline beading that caught light like stars. The silhouette was both powerful and graceful, with strong shoulders tapering to a fitted waist before flowing into a subtle train. "It's from the new collection," Lila explained, her fingers tracing the lines on the screen. "I designed it thinking about Josephine Baker, Dorothy Dandridge, women who turned pain into power, who made themselves impossible to ignore." Ethan nodded slowly. "It's perfect, but we need to think about security. An entrance like this will draw attention." "I don't want attention," Lila started, but Ethan held up a hand. "You need security regardless. It's standard protocol for anyone of your standing. Let me handle that part. Discreet, professional, but present." They spent the next hour mapping out timing. Ethan's driver would pick her up at 7:30 sharp. They would arrive after most guests were seated but before dinner began. The security team would create a buffer, natural but effective. "What about press?" Lila asked, chewing her lip. "There's always local media at these things," Ethan said. "But they won't know who you are. Not at first. By the time they figure it out, you'll be inside." Lila glanced at her watch. "I need to see Marcus." Marcus was her longtime hair and makeup artist, one of the few people who knew her true identity. His small, exclusive salon was tucked away in a quiet part of Beverly Hills, accessible only by appointment. When she arrived, Marcus took one look at her face and knew this was different. "Tell me everything," he said, leading her to his private styling room. Lila explained as he began working, her words spilling out faster and faster. "I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. I want to look like a woman who knows exactly who she is." Marcus finished, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Trust me." For the next 3 hours, Marcus worked his magic. He created a look that enhanced rather than masked, her skin glowing, her natural curls styled in an elegant updo that spoke of confidence rather than conformity. The makeup was subtle but transformative, highlighting her best features while maintaining her authenticity. "There," he said finally, turning her chair towards the mirror. "This is you, just amplified." Lila stared at her reflection, barely breathing. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who had never doubted herself for a moment, who had never slept in abandoned buildings or gone hungry. She looked powerful, reborn. "It's perfect," she whispered. By late afternoon, she was back in Ethan's office, finalizing details. He showed her the car that would transport them, a sleek, black luxury vehicle with tinted windows. The security team would arrive in separate vehicles, blending seamlessly into the background. "The timing is crucial," Ethan explained, showing her the schedule. "We'll arrive at 8:15 exactly. Most guests will be inside, but the event will still be in its early stages. You'll make an entrance, but not a spectacle." Lila nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. "And you'll be there? Right beside you," he promised. Every step. When she finally returned home that evening, the gown was waiting. She'd had it delivered from the studio, and now it hung on her bedroom door like a promise. The beading caught the last rays of sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across her walls. Lila stood before it, reaching out to touch the fabric she'd selected so carefully months ago. She'd designed this gown thinking about transformation, about emergence, about power. Now it would help her tell her own story of metamorphosis. She thought about the girl she'd been 10 years ago, hungry, scared, ashamed. That girl had survived by becoming invisible. But now, invisibility was no longer a shelter. It was a cage. And this gown, this entrance, this night, it would be her key to freedom. The beading sparkled as the sun set, and Lila realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to step into the light, to let the world see exactly who she'd become. Not despite her past, but because of it. She touched the gown one last time before preparing for bed. Tomorrow would change everything, but for the first time in 10 years, she was ready for change. The sleek black Mercedes glided to a stop in front of Westbrook High School at precisely 8:15 in the evening. Lila's hands twisted in her lap as she stared through the tinted windows at the transformed entrance. Blue and silver balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and a banner proclaimed, "Welcome Class of 2013. "Ready?" Ethan's voice was gentle beside her. Layla drew in a deep breath, smoothing her hands over the shimmering fabric of her gown. The dress was her masterpiece, layers of midnight blue silk that seemed to catch starlight, with intricate beading that traced patterns like constellations across the bodice. She had designed it to make women feel powerful, and now she needed that power herself. "I'm ready," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The driver opened her door, and Ethan stepped out first, extending his hand to help her. As she emerged from the car, the warm California evening air kissed her skin. The security team positioned themselves discreetly nearby, professional and alert. Lila straightened to her full height, feeling the dress move with her like liquid midnight. Ethan's hand found the small of her back, warm and reassuring through the silk. Together they approached the entrance. The moment they stepped through the doors, everything changed. The busy chatter of the entrance hall dropped away like someone had hit a mute button. The DJ's music skipped, then recovered. Dozens of faces turned towards them, conversations dying mid-sentence. Lila could feel the wave of recognition and disbelief rippling through the crowd. "Oh my God!" someone whispered loudly. "Is that Lila Hayes?" She kept her chin lifted, channeling every ounce of grace and poise she'd learned over the past decade. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she moved forward, Ethan a steady presence beside her. "That can't be her," another voice muttered. "The homeless girl?" Lila's stride didn't falter. She'd practiced this walk 1,000 times on runways around the world, even if no one had known it was her. Now she used that experience like armor. A woman in a red dress, Jennifer Matthews, who had once poured milk over Lila's only clean shirt, approached with an uncertain smile. "Lila, is it really you?" "Hello, Jennifer," Lila replied, smoothly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to be polite. "How are you?" Before Jennifer could respond, a flash went off nearby. The reunion photographer had spotted them and was hurrying over, camera raised. "Would you mind a photo for the reunion album?" he asked eagerly. More flashes followed as Lila posed gracefully, Ethan's hand never leaving her back. She could feel the crowd growing around them, drawn by the commotion and the mystery of her transformation. "What do you do now?" someone called out. "Who's your date? Where did you get that amazing dress?" The questions came rapid fire, some genuine, others tinged with the same mean girl curiosity that had marked their high school years. Ethan stepped in smoothly, his presence creating a natural buffer. "I hope you'll excuse us," he said with practiced charm. "We should find our table before dinner begins." As they made their way across the room, Lila caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Did you see her skin? It's flawless now. That dress must have cost a fortune. Who's the guy with her? He looks familiar. Remember how she used to smell? God, we were awful." Lila kept her expression serene, though each whisper landed like a pebble in a still pond, creating ripples of memory. She had known this would happen, had prepared for it, but the reality was still overwhelming. Near the bar, a young man in a fashionable suit watched them intently, his fingers moving quickly over his phone screen. Marcus Latimer, fashion blogger and local reporter, frowned slightly as he studied Lila's gown. The silhouette, the beading pattern, the way it moved, it was hauntingly familiar. He zoomed in with his phone's camera, capturing details of the dress. The construction was unmistakable. It had all the hallmarks of a Hayes Atelier design, but this wasn't from any collection he recognized. And Hayes Atelier was famously exclusive, their pieces rarely seen outside of major fashion events. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he watched Lila and her companion make their way to their assigned table. There was something here, a story waiting to be uncovered. He took another photo, this one focusing on her face as she smiled at something her date had said. The mystery woman in the Hayes Atelier gown. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Marcus shifted position slightly, trying to get a better angle for his next shot. Whatever secret was hiding behind that serene smile and that impossible dress, he was going to find it. Meanwhile, Lila settled into her chair, grateful for the moment of relative quiet. Ethan's hand squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured. She looked up at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. The hardest part, making her entrance, facing those first reactions, was over. But as she caught Marcus still watching her from across the room, phone raised, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from finished. The evening wore on, and the initial shock of Lila's entrance gradually settled into a quieter buzz of curiosity. The dance floor had thinned as people drifted away from the reunion, leaving scattered groups chatting at tables or hovering near the bar. The DJ had switched to slower songs, their melodies floating softly through the decorated gymnasium. Lila sat at her table, taking a moment to breathe while Ethan fetched them fresh drinks. Her eyes wandered across the room, noting how different everyone looked after 10 years, some hardly recognizable, others barely changed at all. That's when she spotted her. Renee Chambers stood against the far wall, arms crossed tightly across her chest. The former queen bee of their high school looked nothing like the polished, cruel girl who had made Lila's teenage years a living nightmare. Her blonde hair, once perfectly styled, hung limply around her face. Her dress, while trying to appear fashionable, showed signs of wear. But it was her eyes that caught Lila's attention. They held the same haunted look Lila used to see in her own reflection. Movement near the buffet table drew Lila's gaze. A teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16, was casually browsing the remaining food. Something about her deliberate movements made Lila sit up straighter. The girl glanced around furtively before slipping a dinner roll into her small purse. Then some wrapped cookies, a few pieces of fruit. Lila's heart clenched. She knew those movements. She had made them herself, countless times. This wasn't stealing for fun. It was survival. The girl looked up suddenly, and Lila caught a glimpse of Renee's features in her young face. This must be her daughter. The resemblance was striking, but where teenage Renee had radiated confidence and cruelty, this girl's expression held a wary gentleness. "Mia!" Renee's sharp whisper carried across the room. "We need to go. Now." The girl, Mia, quickly zipped her purse closed and hurried to her mother's side. Renee grabbed her arm, perhaps a bit too roughly, and began steering them toward the exit. Their movements had the practiced urgency of people used to making quick escapes. "Ethan," Lila said as he returned with their drinks, "I need to check something. I'll be right back." She stood before he could respond, following the pair at a discreet distance, through the entrance hall, past the sign-in table, out into the warm evening air. The parking lot was half empty now, making it easy to track their progress without being seen. They headed toward the far corner of the lot, where a faded blue sedan sat beneath a flickering streetlight. As they got closer, Lila could make out shapes through the windows. Blankets piled in the back seat, duffel bags stuffed with clothes, boxes of what looked like non-perishable food items. Her stomach dropped. She knew this setup all too well. Mia climbed into the back seat, carefully arranging herself among the blankets and bags. Renee slipped behind the wheel, her shoulders slumping as soon as she was inside. They sat there for a long moment, neither moving to start the car, and Lila realized they were probably trying to decide where to park for the night. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Renee Chambers, the girl who had once mockingly offered Lila spare change in the school hallway, who had led the cruel chorus of homeless freak chants, was now living in her car with her teenage daughter. Lila's legs felt unsteady as she made her way back inside. The music seemed too loud now, the laughter too bright. She found Ethan waiting exactly where she'd left him, concern evident in his expression as soon as he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, pulling out her chair. Lila sank into it, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Renee Chambers and her daughter are homeless," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're living in their car. I just saw—" The girl was taking food from the buffet, hiding it in her purse, just like I used to do. Ethan's expression softened with understanding. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I see why this is affecting you so deeply. I should help them," Lila said, more to herself than to him. "I know exactly what they're going through. I could—" "Lila." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Your compassion is one of your most beautiful qualities. But remember, this is someone who caused you tremendous pain. Don't let your own past trauma cloud your judgment." "But her daughter," Lila's voice caught. "That girl is innocent. She's just trying to survive, just like I was." "I understand," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "And if you want to help, we can find a way to do that. But be careful about getting personally involved. Sometimes our desire to heal our past through others can lead us into situations that reopen old wounds." Lila nodded, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. She could arrange something through her foundation, maybe? Find a way to help anonymously? The drive home that night seemed endless. The streets of Los Angeles stretched out before her, dotted with shadows, where people like Renee and Mia might be trying to find a safe place to sleep. Every parking lot she passed made her wonder if they had found somewhere to stay. The irony wasn't lost on her, that the girl who had once made her feel worthless for being homeless was now experiencing that same desperation. Part of her, a small, hurt part that still carried the scars of those teenage years, whispered that this was karma. But a larger part, the part that had built her foundation specifically to help homeless youth, ached with empathy. Lila's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she stopped at a red light. The compassion in her heart warred with the echoes of past pain. Renee's cruel words from their school days still had the power to sting, even now. But when she thought of Mia's careful movements at the buffet table, that old pain seemed less important than the chance to prevent another young girl from experiencing the same struggles she had faced. The light turned green, but Lila sat there for a moment longer, torn between her instinct to help and Ethan's warning about reopening old wounds. Finally, a car horn behind her jolted her back to the present, and she pressed the gas pedal, continuing her slow journey home through the quiet city streets. Sunday morning dawned with heavy clouds hanging low over Los Angeles, casting the city in somber shades of gray. Lila woke early, her mind replaying the image of Mia's frightened eyes from the night before. She had tossed and turned all night, haunted by memories of her own desperate teenage years overlapping with what she'd witnessed in the parking lot. Unable to shake the need to help, Lila dressed quickly in simple jeans and a soft sweater. She pulled her hair back into a neat bun, deliberately choosing an understated look that wouldn't draw attention. Before leaving her apartment, she grabbed her phone and typed a quick search for nearby coffee shops. The streets were quiet as she drove, first stopping at a small bakery she frequented. The bell chimed cheerfully as she entered, and warm aromas of fresh pastries enveloped her. She ordered a variety of items: chocolate croissants, fruit Danish, blueberry muffins, along with 3 large coffees. The barista raised an eyebrow at her large order, but Lila just smiled softly. "Sometimes you need extras," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Her heart pounded as she approached the high school where the reunion had been held. The parking lot was mostly empty now, a stark contrast to the bustling scene of the previous evening. She drove slowly past each row until she spotted it, the same weathered sedan, parked beneath a large oak tree at the far end of the lot. The windows were fogged from the morning chill, and what Lila knew would be the condensation of people sleeping inside. She parked her car a few spaces away, not wanting to appear threatening, and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. The paper bag of pastries felt warm in her hands as she stepped out into the cool morning air. Approaching the car carefully, she could make out shadowy forms through the misty windows. She tapped gently on the passenger side window, trying to seem as non-threatening as possible. There was immediate movement inside. She saw Mia startle awake in the back seat, her eyes wide with fear. In the driver's seat, Renee sat up straight, her face a mask of shame and defensiveness. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Lila called softly through the glass. "I was at the reunion last night. I brought some extra coffee and breakfast if you'd like some." She held up the bakery bag and drink carrier as proof of her peaceful intentions. Renee hesitated, clearly weighing the humiliation of accepting help against the rumbling of hungry stomachs. Finally, she rolled down the window just a crack. "Why are you here?" Renee asked, her voice hoarse with sleep and suspicion. Lila kept her expression neutral, careful not to let recognition show in her eyes. "I noticed you left early last night. I was in the area this morning and thought you might like some breakfast." She shrugged, trying to make it seem casual. "The bakery always gives me too much, anyway." Renee studied her face for a long moment before rolling the window down further. That's very kind of you." Lila handed the coffee carrier through the window first, then the bag of pastries. She watched as Mia's eyes lit up at the sight of food, though the girl tried to hide her eagerness. "There's hot chocolate in there too," Lila said, nodding toward the drink carrier. "I wasn't sure if you liked coffee," she added, looking at Mia. The teenager gave her a tiny smile of thanks, reaching for the cup marked with an H on the lid. An awkward silence fell as they sipped their drinks. Lila leaned against the car, trying to project calm rather than pity. "The weather's turning cold," she commented mildly. Renee's shoulders tensed. "We're fine. This is just temporary." "Of course," Lila said quickly. "But I actually work with a program that provides emergency housing assistance." She reached into her purse and pulled out a hotel voucher she'd acquired through her foundation's partnerships. "This is good for 2 weeks at the Comfort Inn on Wilshire. It's already paid for, and they're expecting guests today. It would be a shame for it to go to waste." She held out the voucher, watching emotions war across Renee's face. Pride battling with practicality, shame fighting against need. Finally, Renee reached out with trembling fingers and took the card. "Why would you do this for strangers?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila smiled gently. "Because someone once did it for me." It wasn't exactly a lie. There had been people who helped her during her own homeless period, though none quite so directly. "The program I work with believes in paying it forward." She saw Mia in the back seat, carefully wrapping half her pastry in a napkin, clearly saving it for later. The gesture squeezed Lila's heart. She remembered doing the same thing countless times. "Let me write down the address for you," Lila said, pulling out a notepad. She added her foundation's contact information as well, though not her name. "They're expecting check-in after 11 o'clock this morning. There's a microwave and mini-fridge in the room, and they serve breakfast every morning." Renee clutched the voucher like a lifeline. "Thank you," she said, her earlier suspicion melting into grateful tears. We'll make good use of this time to figure things out." "I know you will," Lila replied softly. She stepped back from the car, giving them space to process their emotions. "Take care of each other." She returned to her car but didn't leave immediately. Instead, she watched from a distance as Renee and Mia gathered their belongings, making sure they had the correct address and were able to start their car. Only when their taillights disappeared around the corner did she finally pull away. The rest of the day passed in a distracted haze. At her studio, Lila found herself staring at half-finished sketches, her mind wandering to thoughts of Renee and Mia. Had they checked in okay? Would they find their feet in those 2 weeks? She knew from experience how precious that breathing room could be when you're trying to rebuild your life. As evening approached, her phone buzzed with Ethan's name on the screen. "Join me for dinner?" he asked, his voice warm and familiar. At his penthouse later, over plates of perfectly prepared salmon, Lila finally let out the breath she'd been holding all day. "I helped them," she admitted, pushing a piece of asparagus around her plate. "I couldn't just leave them there." Ethan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Tell me," he said simply. She explained everything. The morning coffee run, the hotel voucher, the careful dance of helping without revealing her identity. Ethan listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did what your heart told you was right," he said. "That's all anyone can do." "But you warned me about getting involved," Lila reminded him. "I warned you to be careful," he corrected gently. "There's a difference between helping someone and trying to heal your past through them. You found a way to help that protected both them and yourself. I'm proud of you." His words settled something in Lila's chest that had been restless all day. She had done the right thing, even if it stirred up complicated emotions. Looking out over the city lights from Ethan's window, she felt a sense of peace about her decision. She couldn't change her past, but she could use it to understand and help others. And maybe that was the real transformation she'd been looking for all along. Monday morning dawned clear and crisp in Los Angeles. Lila sat at her kitchen counter, sipping her morning tea while composing an email to her assistant. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she carefully worded her request. Please arrange for $500 in grocery gift cards to be delivered anonymously to room 212 at the Comfort Inn on Wilshire. Mark it as a standard foundation care package. Thank you. She pressed send, then gathered her belongings for another visit to the motel. She told herself she was just in the area. But the truth was more complicated. Something about Mia's quiet resilience and Renee's fallen pride kept pulling at her. When Lila knocked on their motel room door around 9:30, she heard shuffling inside before Mia's face appeared in the window. The teenager's eyes lit up with recognition, and she quickly opened the door. "Hi!" Mia exclaimed, then caught herself, lowering her voice. "Mum's just finishing getting ready." The motel room was neat, with their few belongings carefully organized. 2 beds were precisely made, and the small table by the window held scattered job applications. The television played quietly in the background, showing the morning news. "I was passing by and thought I'd check how you're settling in," Lila explained, holding up a paper bag. "I brought some breakfast sandwiches if you're hungry." Mia's eyes widened at the mention of food. "Mom, the nice lady from yesterday is here." Renee emerged from the bathroom, her hair wet from a shower. She looked more put together than yesterday, though exhaustion still lined her face. "Oh, hello," she said cautiously. "You didn't have to." "I was in the neighborhood," Lila insisted smoothly, setting the food on the table. "Please, help yourselves." Mia didn't need to be told twice. She pulled out a warm sandwich and bit into it with barely contained joy. "This is amazing," she mumbled around a mouthful of eggs and cheese. Watching her eat, Lila remembered her own teenage hunger, how food had never quite felt secure, how every meal felt like a gift. She blinked back the memory and focused on the present. Renee sat down slowly, accepting a sandwich with murmured thanks. After a few bites, her reserve cracked slightly. "I keep thinking there must be a catch," she admitted. "People don't just help like this." "Some do," Lila replied softly. "Tell me what happened, if you want to. Sometimes talking helps." Over the next hour, as morning sun streamed through the motel window, Renee's story spilled out. She'd been a middle manager at a retail chain for 8 years, but corporate downsizing had eliminated her position 3 months ago. Her savings had stretched as far as they could, but eventually the rent became impossible. Family members were either unable or unwilling to help, and pride had kept her from asking sooner. "I never thought—" Renee's voice cracked. "I used to judge people who ended up like this. I was so sure of myself back then, and now—" Lila felt that strange mixture of vindication and sorrow twist in her chest. The girl who had once mocked her mercilessly was now living her old nightmare. But seeing Renee's genuine humility and Mia's quiet strength made it impossible to feel triumphant about their situation. "Listen," Lila said, pulling out her phone. "I work with several organizations that help people get back on their feet. Let me share some resources." She spent the next hour showing Renee job placement websites, housing assistance programs, and local support services she knew well from her foundation's work. "The key is to use these 2 weeks to build a plan," she explained. "Start with the job search. Many places are hiring for the holiday season. Once you have income, we can look at housing options." Renee took careful notes, her hands steadier now. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild," Lila answered simply. By early afternoon, Lila was back at her studio, trying to focus on the mountain of work that had accumulated. Her designs for the Paris launch needed final adjustments, and her team was waiting for decisions on fabric choices. She forced herself to concentrate, knowing she couldn't let her professional responsibilities slip. Hours passed in a blur of sketches, fabric swatches, and conference calls. Before she knew it, it was time for the evening board meeting. She gathered her materials and headed to the corporate headquarters where Ethan was waiting. The boardroom buzzed with energy as they discussed the upcoming Paris showcase. Marketing strategies were debated, logistics were finalized, and budgets were approved. But throughout it all, Lila's thoughts kept drifting to Mia's face as she savored that morning's breakfast. After the meeting concluded, Ethan caught her eye and gestured toward the door. They often took walks after late meetings, enjoying the quiet of the corporate complex's landscaped grounds. Tonight, the air was cool and fresh, with the hint of approaching autumn. "You're distracted," Ethan observed as they strolled past elegant water features. "Is it about Renee and her daughter?" Lila nodded, watching the play of light on the rippling water. "I went to see them today. I couldn't help it. Mia, she reminds me so much of myself at that age. And Renee, she's not the same person who bullied me. Life has changed her completely." "And you feel drawn to help them more," Ethan stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Lila stopped walking and turned to face him. "I know you're worried I'll get too involved, that I'll try to fix my past through them. But this feels different. It feels like maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ethan studied her face for a long moment. "Then trust that instinct," he said finally. "You've always had good judgment, Lila. Just remember to protect yourself too." His words warmed her, grateful for his understanding and support. They finished their walk in comfortable silence, each lost in thought. That night, as Lila lay in bed, she knew she was becoming increasingly entangled in Renee and Mia's situation. But somehow it felt right, as if the universe had brought them back into her life for a reason. She drifted off to sleep, with plans already forming in her mind for how to help them take their next steps forward. Dawn painted the Los Angeles sky in soft pinks and oranges as Lila pulled into the parking lot of a department store. She had woken before sunrise, her mind already racing with plans to help Mia. The store was just opening, and only a few early morning shoppers meandered through the aisles. Lila moved purposefully through the junior section, selecting items with care. A pair of dark wash jeans that would match anything. 3 solid-colored t-shirts in navy, burgundy, and forest green. A simple grey hoodie for cooler days. A pack of fresh socks. New undergarments still in their packaging. She remembered all too well what it felt like to wear worn-out clothes to school, trying to fade into the background to avoid attention. At the shoe section, she chose sturdy sneakers in a neutral color, practical but stylish enough that a teenage girl would feel good wearing them. Basic backpack completed the essentials. Everything was chosen to help Mia blend in comfortably with her peers while maintaining her dignity. The morning sun had fully risen by the time Lila pulled into the motel parking lot. She gathered the shopping bags, her heart beating a little faster as she approached their room. When Renee opened the door, surprise flickered across her tired face. "Good morning," Lila said warmly. "I hope I'm not too early. The local community outreach group I mentioned yesterday came through with some donations for Mia." Renee's eyes widened at the bags. This is too much." "Not at all," Lila assured her. "These are basic necessities every teenager should have." Mia appeared behind her mother, curiosity lighting up her face. Lila noticed she was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, slightly rumpled from sleeping in them. "Would you like to see what's here?" Lila asked gently. Mia nodded, moving forward as Renee stepped aside to let Lila in. They laid the items out on one of the beds, and Mia's eyes grew bigger with each piece revealed. When she touched the soft fabric of the hoodie, her fingers trembled slightly. "Why don't you try something on?" Lila suggested. "See how it fits?" Mia gathered the jeans, a t-shirt, and the new sneakers, disappearing into the bathroom. While they waited, Lila noticed Renee blinking back tears. "I never wanted this for her," Renee whispered. "She deserves so much better." "This is temporary," Lila reminded her softly. "You're both stronger than you know." When Mia emerged, the transformation was subtle but significant. The properly fitting clothes made her stand straighter, and a shy smile played at her lips as she looked in the mirror. "You look beautiful," Lila said, remembering how rarely she had heard those words at Mia's age. "How do you feel?" Like myself again," Mia answered quietly. Over the next hour, Lila shared gentle advice about personal care and confidence. She showed Mia how to style her hair in simple but neat ways, using a brush and hair ties she had included in the shopping bags. They talked about skin care, and Lila demonstrated how to apply the basic moisturizer she'd brought. "The most important thing," Lila said as she helped Mia arrange her new items in the backpack, "is remembering that your worth isn't in what you wear or where you sleep. It's in who you are." After lunch, Lila drove them to various support centers around the city. At the Department of Social Services, she helped Renee navigate the overwhelming paperwork for emergency assistance and food benefits. Her quiet presence made the process less intimidating, and her knowledge of the system helped expedite their applications. They visited a job center where Renee could use computers for her search and get help updating her resume. Lila noticed how Renee's shoulders gradually relaxed as they built a concrete plan for moving forward. By the time evening approached, exhaustion had settled deep in Lila's bones, but her heart felt full. She had made a real difference today, not just with material help, but with the kind of emotional support she had once desperately needed herself. Back in her apartment, Lila spread her latest sketches across her dining table. The upcoming collection needed final touches before production could begin. She was deep in concentration when her laptop chimed with an incoming video call from Ethan. His familiar face appeared on screen, and he immediately noticed the contentment in her expression. "Well, well," he said with a knowing smile. "Someone's had a good day." Lila couldn't help but laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "You're practically glowing," he teased. "Our angel undercover has been busy, hasn't she?" "Stop," she protested, but her smile widened. I helped them take some practical steps today. Nothing extraordinary." "Except that's exactly what makes it extraordinary," Ethan said softly. "You're giving them what you once needed, not just help, but dignity." His words touched something deep in Lila's heart. This warmth she felt, this sense of purpose, she had kept it at arm's length for so long, afraid to let anyone too close. But now it felt right, natural, like coming home to herself. They chatted about business matters, reviewed some design decisions, but the conversation kept drifting back to Mia and Renee. Ethan listened attentively, offering suggestions when asked, but mostly just providing the supportive presence she had come to rely on. When they finally said goodnight, Lila prepared for bed with a lightness she hadn't felt in days. As she lay in the darkness, her mind wasn't racing with anxiety or old hurts. Instead, she thought of Mia's smile in her new clothes, of Renee's determination at the job center, of small steps forward and hope rekindled. Sleep came easily, peaceful and deep, as if her heart had finally found its proper alignment with the world. The girl who had once been homeless was now helping others find their way home, and in doing so, she was healing parts of herself she hadn't even known were still wounded. Thursday morning painted Los Angeles in gentle golden light, streaming through the motel room's thin curtains. Leila arrived early with fresh pastries and coffee, continuing her routine of checking on Mia and Renee. As they shared breakfast, Mia kept fidgeting with her napkin, clearly wanting to say something. "Is everything okay?" Lila asked softly, noticing the girl's nervousness. Mia glanced at her mother before speaking. I got selected to perform in our school's arts showcase tonight." Her voice grew quieter. "But I don't think I can go." "Why not, sweetheart?" Lila leaned forward, concerned. "All the other kids will be dressed up nice." Mia's eyes dropped to her lap. "I don't have anything proper to wear. Mom tried to find something at the thrift store, but—" She trailed off, shoulders slumping. Lila's heart clenched. She remembered all too well the pain of missing school events because she didn't have the right clothes. Without hesitation, she pulled out her measuring tape. She always carried one in her purse. "Would you let me take your measurements?" she asked gently. "I might be able to help." Mia stood, surprised but hopeful, as Lila carefully measured her height, shoulders, waist, and other key points. She jotted the numbers in her phone, mind already racing through fabric options at her studio. "What's your favorite color?" Lila asked. "Purple," Mia answered immediately. "Like lavender." Lila smiled, remembering the beautiful lavender silk she had left over from her last collection. "Give me a few hours. I know someone who might be able to help." Back at her studio, Lila worked with focused intensity. She selected the lavender silk, its soft sheen perfect for stage lighting, and began cutting with practiced precision. Her fingers flew over the fabric, creating clean lines and subtle details that would flatter Mia's young figure without being too mature. Her assistant poked her head in once, curious about why their usually scheduled day had been disrupted, but Lila barely noticed. She was lost in the work, in the joy of creating something special for someone who needed it desperately. Hours passed as she carefully constructed the dress. Simple cap sleeves, a fitted bodice that flowed into a knee-length skirt with just enough movement for drama, elegant but age-appropriate. She added subtle gathering at the waist and tiny crystal buttons down the back that would catch the stage lights. By late afternoon, the dress was ready. Lila drove back to the motel, the carefully wrapped garment laid across her back seat. When she knocked on their door, Mia answered quickly, as if she'd been waiting. "Close your eyes," Lila instructed with a smile. She hung the dress on the bathroom door and positioned Mia in front of it. "Okay, look." Mia's gasp was followed immediately by tears. She reached out to touch the fabric with trembling fingers. It's beautiful," she whispered. "Is it really for me?" "Try it on," Lila encouraged, watching as Mia carefully took the dress into the bathroom. When she emerged, the transformation was stunning. The color brought out the warm undertones in her skin, and the cut made her look both graceful and confident. Mia twirled once, the skirt floating perfectly, and burst into fresh tears. "I've never had anything so beautiful," she managed between sobs. Renee stood in the corner, her own eyes wet. "How can we ever thank you?" "By letting your daughter shine tonight," Lila answered simply. That evening, Lila sat in the back row of the school auditorium, Renee beside her. They watched as student after student performed. Instrumental pieces, dance numbers, dramatic readings. Then Mia stepped onto the stage, the lavender dress catching the lights exactly as Lila had hoped. The opening notes of "Bridge Over Troubled Water" filled the space, and Mia's clear, pure voice soared over the piano accompaniment. Lila felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The girl's talent was undeniable, but it was the emotion in her voice that captured everyone's attention. She sang about comfort in dark times with the understanding of someone who had lived through storms. When the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted in applause, rising to their feet. Mia's smile blazed across the stage, and Lila saw tears streaming down Renee's face. "She hasn't smiled like this in months," Renee whispered, clutching Lila's hand. "Not since everything fell apart. I forgot she could look so happy." After the showcase, they walked to Lila's car together, Mia practically floating with joy. Other students had complimented her dress, and her music teacher had praised her performance effusively. The drive back to the motel was filled with excited chatter about the evening. Later that night, in her apartment, Lila was still riding the high of the evening when her phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. "Tell me everything," he said as soon as she answered. "You sound like you're about to burst with happiness." Lila couldn't contain her excitement as she described Mia's performance, the dress, the standing ovation. "You should have seen her face, Ethan. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion." "You gave her more than a dress today," he said warmly. "You gave her confidence, dignity, the chance to be seen for who she really is. She deserves that chance." Lila replied softly. "They both do." They talked for a while longer about the evening's triumph, sharing the joy of the moment. Neither noticed the social media buzz beginning to build around photos from the reunion or the fashion bloggers connecting dots they weren't meant to connect just yet. Sunlight streamed through Lila's bedroom windows on Friday morning, but the peaceful dawn quickly shattered as her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, 15 voicemails. Her heart began to race as she saw the urgent messages from her design team, her lawyer, and Ethan. With trembling fingers, she opened the first news article that had been sent to her. The headline made her stomach drop. "Mystery woman at high school reunion. Fashion's best-kept secret about to unravel." Below was a crystal-clear photo of her in the couture gown from the reunion, Ethan's protective hand at her back. The article dissected every detail of her appearance, drawing connections between her gown's distinctive style and Hayes Atelier's signature elements. As she scrolled through more articles, each one seemed to dig deeper than the last. Her phone kept buzzing with new notifications, but she couldn't look away from the screen. Another headline appeared. "Billionaire Ethan Reyes's mystery woman. Sources confirm connection to exclusive Hayes Atelier brand." Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Then came the worst one, the article that made her world collapse. From homeless to high society? Is Lila Hayes the hidden face behind Hayes Atelier? The story included old public school records, quotes from former classmates about the homeless girl they remembered, and speculation about her rise to success. They had even found an old yearbook photo, the one year she'd actually been present for picture day, looking thin and haunted in borrowed clothes. "No, no, no," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Everything she'd built, every careful barrier she'd constructed to protect herself, was crumbling. Her phone rang again. "Ethan," she answered this time, her voice breaking. "They know. They found everything." "Come to my penthouse right now," he said firmly. "I'm sending Marcus with the car. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer any calls. Just come straight here." 20 minutes later, Ethan's driver helped her through the private garage entrance, shielding her from the few photographers who had already gathered outside her building. In the elevator, she hugged herself tightly, trying to stop shaking. Ethan met her as soon as the doors opened, immediately pulling her into a protective embrace. "I'm so sorry," he murmured into her hair. "We'll handle this." "How?" she choked out. "They found my school records, Ethan. They know I was homeless. They've probably already tracked down people who saw me sleeping in abandoned buildings, digging through dumpsters for food. Everything I worked so hard to overcome. It's all going to be tabloid fodder now." He led her to the living room, where multiple tablets displayed various news sites. Their PR team had already assembled remotely, waiting on video conference. "We need to get ahead of this," one of them said. "Issue a statement, perhaps do a controlled interview." "No," Lila cut in. "No interviews, no statements. I can't face this." "Lila," Ethan said gently, "maybe it's time to—" "Don't tell me it's time to step into the spotlight," she interrupted, pulling away from him. "This isn't how I wanted—" "They're making it sound like some rags-to-riches fairy tale, but they don't understand. They don't know what it was like." Her phone buzzed again, this time with messages from her design team. Reporters had surrounded the studio, demanding comments. Some had even tracked down her apartment building. "I need to disappear," she whispered. "I need to go somewhere they can't find me." "You can stay here as long as you need," Ethan offered. "The security is better, and no one can get past the front desk without approval." But Lila barely heard him. She was lost in memories she'd tried so hard to suppress. The biting cold of winter nights spent huddled in doorways, the gnawing hunger that never really went away, the shame of showing up to school in the same dirty clothes day after day. "The guest room is ready for you," Ethan said softly, seeing her spiral into dark thoughts. "Why don't you try to rest?" She nodded numbly, letting him guide her down the hallway. The guest room was elegant but comfortable, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Right now, though, she could only see it as a hiding place. "I'll handle everything," Ethan assured her. "Just take care of yourself right now." But as soon as the door closed behind him, Lila crumpled onto the bed, silent sobs racking her body. All the years of therapy, all the success she'd achieved, all the careful walls she'd built, none of it could protect her from the shame and violation she felt now. Hours passed. She ignored knocks at the door, refused offers of food. Her phone continued buzzing until its battery died. The sun crossed the sky, painting the room in evolving shades of light, but Lila remained curled on the bed, tears flowing until she had none left. As night fell, she finally stirred, her body stiff from lying in one position too long. She moved to the window, looking down at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, reporters were probably still camped outside her studio and apartment, hungry for the story of the homeless girl who became a fashion icon. "I won't give them the satisfaction," she whispered to her reflection in the window. "I won't let them turn my pain into entertainment." She pulled out her laptop and began typing an email to her lawyer. She would sell her stake in the company, transfer creative control to her team. She would disappear to somewhere quiet, somewhere no one would think to look for her, somewhere she could hide the parts of herself that the world had no right to see. As she hit send on the email, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. But these were tears of determination, not defeat. She had survived worse than this. She had rebuilt herself from nothing once before. She could do it again. Lying back down on the bed, exhaustion finally overtook her. Her last conscious thought was a vow to herself. She would vanish so completely that the world would forget Lila Hayes had ever existed. Let them have their headlines. She would have her peace. The Saturday morning sun tried desperately to peek through the heavy curtains of Ethan's guest room, but Lila had drawn them tight, creating a cocoon of darkness that matched her mood. She lay curled on her side, staring blankly at her dead phone on the nightstand. She had no desire to charge it, knowing it would only bring more messages, more demands, more exposure of the life she'd fought so hard to leave behind. Her laptop chimed softly with another urgent email from her design team. The Paris show was less than 2 weeks away, and they needed her approval on final alterations. The sound felt like an accusation, each ping a reminder of the life that was unraveling around her. "I can't," she whispered to the empty room. "I just can't." The elegant guest room, with its cream-colored walls and plush carpet, felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. She had spent the night drifting in and out of fitful sleep, haunted by memories she thought she'd buried years ago. The feeling of newspaper stuffed in her shoes to cover the holes, the ache of hunger that made her dizzy during class, the burning shame when other students would wrinkle their noses and move away from her. Another email chime broke through her thoughts, this one from her production manager, marked, "Urgent Paris schedule confirmation needed." Lila pulled the silk comforter over her head, trying to block out the world. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but she ignored it. She had gone hungry before, at least now it was by choice. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a gentle knock came at the door. "Lila." Ethan's voice was soft but firm. "I'm coming in." She didn't respond, but heard the door open anyway. Footsteps crossed the room, and the curtains rustled as Ethan pulled them slightly open, letting in a shaft of afternoon light. "You need to eat something," he said, setting a tray on the bedside table. The smell of soup and fresh bread made her stomach clench. "And we need to talk." Lila remained under the covers. "There's nothing to talk about. I've made my decision. I'm shutting down Hayes Atelier." "No, you're not." The mattress dipped as Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "You're having an understandable emotional reaction to a violation of your privacy, but I won't let you destroy everything you've built." She emerged from under the comforter, her eyes red-rimmed and fierce. "Everything I built was based on staying anonymous, on controlling my own narrative. Now they're turning my life into some kind of inspirational circus act. The homeless girl who made it big. They're probably digging up every humiliating detail as we speak." "What you survived isn't shameful, Lila," Ethan said quietly. "It's a testament to your strength, your resilience, your— Stop it!" She sat up, hands clenched in the sheets. "Stop trying to make it sound noble. You don't know what it was like, the things I had to do just to survive. Sleeping in abandoned buildings, stealing food, washing in public restrooms." Her voice cracked. "I can't have that splashed across magazines and websites, I can't." "So you're going to run?" Ethan's voice held a challenge. "Throw away your company, abandon your employees, let your talent go to waste, all because you're afraid of people knowing your truth?" "My truth?" Lila laughed bitterly. "My truth is ugly and painful and private. It's mine to tell or not tell." "You're right," Ethan agreed. "It is yours. But running now, hiding away, that will keep you locked in that trauma forever. You'll always be that scared girl, sleeping in abandoned buildings, even if you're hiding in a mansion." Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks. "I don't know how to be both people at once, the successful designer and that girl." "They're the same person," Ethan said gently. "And both of them are remarkable." He stood, straightening his suit jacket. "I have a board meeting I can't miss. Please eat something. We can talk more later." After he left, Lila sat in the quiet room for a long time, the soup growing cold beside her. Finally, she rose and began to wander through Ethan's penthouse, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. She paused at the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, looking out over the city she had once navigated as a homeless teenager. From up here, everything looked small, manageable. But she remembered how big and threatening those same streets had felt from ground level. Her reflection ghosted in the window glass, a successful woman in designer loungewear, looking down at the world from a billionaire's penthouse. But superimposed over that image, she could still see the skinny teenager in ragged clothes, trying to be invisible as she searched for a safe place to sleep. Memories washed over her, the kind librarian who used to let her stay until closing time on cold days, the coffee shop owner who would accidentally drop day-old pastries in a clean bag by the dumpster, the art teacher who left the classroom unlocked during lunch so Lila could work on her designs in peace. She had survived not just through her own determination, but through small acts of kindness from strangers who saw her humanity when others looked away. They had helped her hold on to hope when everything seemed darkest. The city lights began to twinkle on as dusk approached. Lila pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the streets come alive with evening activity. Somewhere down there, reporters were probably still camped outside her studio and apartment, hungry for her story. She couldn't hide forever. She knew that now. But the thought of facing those cameras, those questions, those judging eyes, it made her heart race with anxiety. "I'm not ready," she whispered to her reflection. "I'm not ready for them to see all of me." The memory of Mia's grateful smile flashed through her mind, followed by Renee's humbled expression. They had seen her, really seen her, even if they didn't know who she was. And she had been able to help them because she understood their struggle in a way few others could. Maybe there was strength in that understanding, but the fear still clawed at her throat, threatening to choke her with memories of shame and desperation she had worked so hard to overcome. As night settled over the city, Lila remained at the window, caught between the woman she had become and the girl she used to be, searching for a way to reconcile both parts of herself in a world that now knew her name. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, casting warm patches across Lila's borrowed bed. She had barely slept, tossing and turning as her mind churned with worries about the media circus waiting outside. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she reached for it reluctantly, expecting another reporter's inquiry. Instead, the message made her sit up straight. "Message from Sunrise Motel. Guest in room 214 requests urgent meeting with Ms. Hayes. Guest name, Renee Chambers." Lila's heart skipped. How had Renee figured out who she was? She read the message 3 more times, her fingers hovering uncertainly over the screen. After everything that happened, after all the years of pain, did she really want to face Renee now? But curiosity nagged at her. And something else, a pull she couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was time to face this final piece of her past. She dressed simply in dark jeans and a soft sweater, choosing clothes that wouldn't draw attention. The drive to the motel felt both too long and too short. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as she parked in the nearly empty lot. The lobby was quiet when she entered, just a sleepy desk clerk flipping through a magazine. Renee stood by a collection of worn armchairs, pacing nervously. She looked different in the morning light. Smaller, somehow, more vulnerable than she had at the reunion. When she saw Lila, Renee's face filled with a complex mix of emotions, shame, relief, and something that looked almost like hope. "Thank you for coming," Renee said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." Lila nodded stiffly, keeping her distance. "Why did you ask to see me?" Renee gestured to one of the chairs. "Could we sit, please? There are things I need to say." They settled into the worn seats, an awkward silence stretching between them. Renee twisted her hands in her lap, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I recognized you at the reunion," she finally admitted. "Not right away, but when you helped us that first morning, there was something in your eyes. The same quiet strength I remember from school. I should have said something then, but I was too ashamed." Lila's throat tightened. "Ashamed of what? That I wasn't the worthless girl you thought I was?" "No," Renee whispered. "Ashamed of who I was back then, of what I did to you." She looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. "I was horrible to you, Lila, cruel in ways that keep me awake at night. And I need you to know how deeply, truly sorry I am." The words hung in the air between them. Lila's hands clenched in her lap as memories surfaced, taunts in the hallway, cruel laughter, belongings stolen from her backpack. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why did you hate me so much?" "I didn't hate you," Renee said. "I envied you. Even when you had nothing, you never broke. You kept coming to school, kept studying, kept drawing in that sketchbook of yours. You had this inner light that nothing could dim. And I hated that because I felt so hollow inside." Fresh tears spilled down Renee's cheeks. "I was the popular girl with the perfect life, but I knew it was all fake. You were real in a way I didn't know how to be. So I tried to break you instead of learning from you. And I will regret that for the rest of my life." Lila sat very still, absorbing these words. The hurt teenager inside her wanted to reject this apology, to hold on to the protective shell of anger. But something in Renee's raw honesty reached past those defenses. "There's more," Renee continued softly. "Mia's been worried sick about you since you disappeared. She doesn't know who you really are. She just keeps asking about the nice woman who helped us, wondering if something bad happened to make you stop visiting." A lump formed in Lila's throat as she thought of Mia's gentle spirit, so different from her mother's teenage self. "That dress you made her—" Renee's voice cracked. "No one had ever done anything like that for her before. You gave her more than just clothes. You gave her dignity, hope. She sees you as an angel, Lila. Not because you're famous or successful, but because you showed her kindness when we needed it most." Tears pricked at Lila's eyes. She had been so focused on hiding from the media spotlight that she hadn't considered how her sudden disappearance might affect Mia. "Would you—" Renee hesitated. "Would you come up to see her? Just for a little while? She's been so down these past few days." Layla found herself nodding before she could second-guess the decision. They rode the elevator in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the room, Mia was curled up on one of the beds with a book. Her face lit up when she saw Lila. "You came back!" she exclaimed, jumping up to give Lila an impulsive hug. "I was so worried. Are you okay? We saw all these news stories about some famous designer, and then you stopped coming by." "I'm okay," Lila assured her, returning the hug. "I'm sorry I worried you. Things have been complicated." They spent the afternoon together in that small motel room, sharing simple sandwiches and fruit that Renee had bought with her grocery card. Mia chattered happily about school, about wearing the dress Lila made her, about a music competition coming up. Her innocent enthusiasm filled the room with warmth, dissolving the lingering tension between the adults. As the sun began to set, painting the room in soft orange light, Lila realized she felt lighter than she had in days. The weight of shame and fear that had been crushing her since the media exposure had lifted somewhat. These two people who had known her at her lowest point now knew her at her highest, and they saw her humanity in both places. When she finally left, promising Mia she would visit again soon, the city seemed different somehow. The same streets that had felt threatening now held possibility. She drove back to Ethan's penthouse with growing clarity. She found him in his home office, reading through papers. He looked up as she entered, concern evident in his expression. "I think," she said slowly, "I might be ready to face the world again." The morning light streamed through Ethan's penthouse windows, painting the guest room in warm, golden hues. Lila opened her eyes, feeling a strange calm settle over her. After days of emotional turmoil, her path forward suddenly seemed clear. She found Ethan in the kitchen, already dressed in a crisp navy suit and sipping his morning coffee. "I need your help," she said without preamble, Can you arrange a press conference for tomorrow? Something intimate but professional? Maybe that small theatre downtown?" Ethan's eyes lit up with pride. "Of course. I'll make the calls right away." He pulled out his phone and stepped onto the balcony, already speaking with his events team. Lila settled at the dining room table with her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Writing this speech felt monumental. Every word would shape how the world saw her story. She began typing slowly. "For years, I hid in the shadows of my own success, ashamed of a past that actually proved my strength." The words began flowing more naturally as she allowed herself to be honest about her journey. She wrote about sleeping in abandoned buildings, about sketching designs by streetlight, about never giving up on her dreams even when others gave up on her. By mid-morning, Ethan's team had secured the venue and sent out press notifications. Lila's phone buzzed with incoming video call requests from her executive board. She took a deep breath and accepted the first one. "Lila!" Her creative director's familiar face filled the screen. "We've been so worried. Are you really ready for this?" "More than ready," she replied, surprising herself with her steady voice. "I'm done hiding." One by one, her team members joined the call. These people had protected her privacy for years, helping build Hayes Atelier while keeping its founder anonymous. Now they listened intently as she outlined her plans for tomorrow's reveal. "We're behind you 100%. Her marketing director declared firmly. "This could actually be powerful for the brand. Authenticity resonates with people." As afternoon approached, Lila felt compelled to visit Renee and Mia. She needed them to understand what was coming. The drive to the motel gave her time to gather her thoughts. She found them in their room, Mia working on homework, while Renee sorted through job applications. Both looked up with warm smiles when she entered. "I wanted you to hear this from me first," Lila began, sitting on the edge of one bed. "Tomorrow, I'm holding a press conference. I'm going to tell my whole story, including how I've been helping you these past weeks." Renee's face tightened with concern. "We don't want to cause you any trouble." "You're not," Lila assured her quickly. "In fact, you've helped me find my purpose again. I'm planning to expand our company's outreach programs, help more families in crisis. Your situation reminded me why I started designing in the first place, to help people feel seen and valued." Mia jumped up and threw her arms around Lila. "You're so brave," she whispered. "Like a real-life superhero." Lila hugged her back tightly, feeling tears prick at her eyes. This girl's pure heart had helped heal something broken inside her. "Nothing will change with the support you're receiving," she promised them both. "If anything, I hope to do more. You've shown me that sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply can also lead us toward healing." Back at Ethan's penthouse that evening, Lila stood before the full-length mirror in her room, practicing her speech. Her voice shook at first, especially during the painful parts about homelessness and bullying, but with each repetition, she grew stronger. A soft knock interrupted her 20th run-through. Ethan entered, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. He handed her one and sat beside her on the plush window seat. "You know," he said quietly, "you've already won the hardest battle." Lila looked at him questioningly. "You chose truth over fear, compassion over bitterness." He smiled gently. "The world will see tomorrow what I've always seen in you, a woman of extraordinary strength and grace." His words settled something inside her. She sipped her tea, watching the city lights twinkle below. Tomorrow would change everything, but for the first time since her identity was leaked, she felt ready. Later, as she climbed into bed, nervous excitement fluttered in her stomach. She thought of all the people who would hear her story, not just the fashion world, but maybe other young people facing similar struggles. Perhaps by standing in her truth, she could help them find their own strength. Sleep came easier than she expected, her dreams filled with images of butterflies emerging from chrysalises, spreading their wings in the sunlight. Tomorrow, she too would finally step into the light. The early morning sun had barely risen when reporters began gathering outside the historic Wilshire Theatre. By 9 o'clock, the line of media vans stretched down the block, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like metal flowers seeking light. Inside, staff bustled about, adjusting microphones and testing lighting. At precisely 10:45, a sleek black car pulled up to the private entrance. Ethan stepped out first, his tall frame commanding attention, as he helped Lila from the vehicle. She wore a dove-grey suit of her own design, crisp lines softened by subtle draping that spoke of both strength and grace. Her natural hair was styled in elegant coils, and she wore minimal jewelry, just small pearl earrings that had been her mother's. "Ready?" Ethan murmured, offering his arm. Lila nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her prepared speech, but her heart felt remarkably calm. They walked through the back corridors of the theatre, the click of her heels echoing against marble floors. At 11 o'clock sharp, Lila stepped onto the stage. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, momentarily blinding her. She blinked, finding her place behind the podium as Ethan took a supportive position slightly behind her. The sea of faces stared back expectantly, notepads and recording devices at the ready. Taking a deep breath, she began to read. "For years, I hid in the shadows of my own success, ashamed of a past that actually proved my strength." Her voice wavered slightly but grew stronger with each word. "Today I stand before you as Lila Hayes, founder and creative director of Hayes Atelier. But more importantly, I stand before you as someone who knows what it means to have nothing and everything." The theatre fell silent as she described those dark teenage years. She spoke of sleeping in abandoned buildings, of washing in gas station bathrooms, of sketching designs by streetlight, because art was the only thing that gave her hope. Her voice cracked as she recalled the daily humiliation of attending school while homeless. "I wasn't ugly," she stated firmly, looking directly into the cameras. "I was hungry, I was scared, I was alone, and no child should ever go through that." Phones lowered as reporters stopped typing, caught up in her words. In the third row, a veteran fashion journalist wiped away tears. "Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Hayes Hope Foundation." Lila continued, her voice growing stronger. "With initial funding of $20 million jointly provided by myself and Ethan Reyes, we will focus on supporting homeless youth through housing assistance, educational opportunities, and mentorship programs." She outlined the foundation's initiatives: emergency shelter partnerships, scholarship programs, job training. As she spoke, Lila noticed several reporters dabbing at their eyes with tissues. Even the most hardened journalists seemed moved by her testimony. "Success isn't about rising above your past," she concluded. "It's about reaching back to help others rise with you. Thank you." The theatre erupted in applause. Ethan stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her back in silent support as cameras flashed again. The gesture spoke volumes about their partnership, both professional and personal. As soon as the press conference ended, social media exploded. Lila Hayes began trending worldwide. Fashion blogs praised her courage. News outlets highlighted her foundation's ambitious goals. Celebrity supporters tweeted messages of admiration and solidarity. But perhaps most touching were the messages flooding in from ordinary people. Former homeless youth, social workers, teachers, all sharing how her story had moved them. Hayes Atelier's website crashed from the sudden surge in traffic as customers rushed to support the brand. Backstage, surrounded by her team, Lila finally allowed herself to exhale. The weight of secrecy she'd carried for so long had lifted. In its place was something lighter, brighter. Hope. The truth had set her free, and in doing so would help set others free as well. The Wednesday morning sun streamed through the windows of a quiet cafe in downtown Los Angeles, where 4 people sat around a corner table sharing breakfast. Lila Hayes couldn't stop smiling as she watched Mia devour her stack of chocolate chip pancakes. Beside her, Ethan nursed his coffee while Renee picked at her eggs Benedict, still seeming unsure of her place in this gathering. "I can hardly believe it," Renee said softly, scrolling through news updates on her phone. "The foundation has already received over $2 million in donations since yesterday's announcement. People really connected with your story, Layla." Lila nodded, warming her hands around her teacup. "It's overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Every donation means another child might avoid what we went through." Speaking of which, Renee straightened in her chair, setting down her phone. "I know I don't deserve to ask for anything more, but I used to work in office administration before everything fell apart. If you need help with the foundation—" "Are you offering to volunteer?" Lila asked, already knowing where this was headed. "Yes, I could help organize donations, handle paperwork. How about I hire you instead?" Lila interrupted gently. "We need an administrative director who understands both sides of this issue. Someone who knows what it means to need help, and what it takes to provide it." Renee's eyes filled with tears. "You'd trust me with that? After everything?" "The past is past," Lila said firmly. "We all deserve second chances." Mia squealed and hugged her mother tight, nearly knocking over her orange juice in excitement. Ethan smoothly caught the glass, sharing a warm look with Lila over the teenager's head. Over the next few days, Lila threw herself into launching the foundation while reconnecting with her design team. Her inbox overflowed with messages from around the world: teenagers in shelters, single mothers in crisis, social workers and teachers who'd helped students like her. Each story touched her heart, confirming that stepping into the light had been worth every moment of fear. Her design studio buzzed with renewed energy. The team that had protected her privacy for so long now worked with fresh passion, knowing their creations supported a greater mission. Pre-orders for the upcoming collection broke all previous records. Ethan attended every foundation meeting, every press interview, every planning session. His quiet strength remained her anchor as they navigated the whirlwind of attention. She noticed how his hand would find the small of her back during photo ops, how his eyes sought hers across crowded rooms, how his smile seemed reserved just for her. After the Foundation's inaugural board meeting on Friday evening, they decided to walk back to the office instead of taking the car. The city hummed around them, streetlights creating pools of amber warmth in the growing dusk. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lila asked, gesturing at a billboard featuring Hayes Atelier's latest campaign. "Back when you first invested in my little startup. I knew you were extraordinary," Ethan replied, "though I admit I didn't expect to feel quite so—" He trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. They paused beneath a street lamp, its glow creating a gentle halo around them. Ethan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Lila," he said softly, "I've watched you pour your heart into helping others while keeping your own heart carefully guarded. I've seen your strength, your compassion, your brilliant mind at work. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I fell in love with all of it. With all of you." Lila's breath caught in her throat as Ethan continued. "I loved your strength long before the world admired it. I loved your kindness before you felt safe enough to show it freely. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend my life loving every new facet of you that emerges." Standing there in the warm light, surrounded by the city she once wandered alone, Lila felt the last of her walls crumble. She had built her success on staying guarded, protected. But maybe true strength meant being brave enough to let love in. She squeezed Ethan's hands, tears shining in her eyes as she smiled up at him. For the first time in her life, she felt completely, wonderfully safe. 1 week later, bright sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hayes Hope Foundation's first youth shelter. The modern 3-story building stood as a beacon of hope in downtown Los Angeles, its fresh white walls and cheerful murals a stark contrast to the dingy shelters Lila remembered from her own youth. Mia Chambers practically bounced with excitement as she led a small group through the facility. "And this is the computer lab," she announced proudly, gesturing to a room filled with brand-new workstations. "Ms. Hayes made sure we have everything we need for homework and college applications." Lila watched from the doorway, her heart swelling as Mia showed off the space. The teenager wore a new Hayes Atelier dress, tailored specially for the occasion, and carried herself with newfound confidence. As the first recipient of the Foundation's educational scholarship, Mia had blossomed into a natural ambassador for their mission. "You've given her more than just resources?" Ethan murmured beside Lila. "You've given her hope." The shelter included everything Lila had once desperately needed. Clean dormitory rooms with privacy dividers, modern bathrooms with hygiene supplies, a fully stocked kitchen, counseling offices, and classrooms for tutoring and job training. Most importantly, it offered round-the-clock support from caring staff who understood trauma and healing. At 11 o'clock, crowds gathered in front of the building for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Lila stepped up to the podium, taking a deep breath as she faced the assembled press and supporters. "When I was 16 years old, I slept in abandoned buildings and searched dumpsters for food," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today I stand before you not just as a fashion designer, but as someone who knows that survival shouldn't be a child's full-time job. Hayes Atelier will always be part of my story. But this foundation, this mission to provide dignity, safety, and second chances, this is my life's true purpose." Applause erupted as Lila cut the royal blue ribbon, officially opening the shelter's doors. After posing for photos and speaking with reporters, she felt a gentle touch on her elbow. Ethan gestured toward the garden courtyard behind the building, leading her away from the crowd. The private garden buzzed with butterflies and hummingbirds drawn to the carefully selected native plants blooming in raised beds. Stone paths wound between meditation spots and small sitting areas designed for quiet reflection. "Look how far you've come," Ethan said softly, taking both her hands in his. "You're not that scared girl anymore, Lila. You're the woman who transformed her pain into purpose, the woman who gives others the chance she never had, the woman I fall more in love with every day." Before Lila could respond, Ethan pulled her close and kissed her gently. She melted into his embrace, grateful for how far life had brought her, from hiding in shadows to standing proudly in the light. When they parted, Lila squeezed his hand and walked back into the shelter. Through the front doors came a young girl, maybe 14, clutching a worn backpack to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously around the bright space, holding the same fear and uncertainty Lila once knew so well. With a warm smile, Lila stepped forward to welcome her, ready to offer the hope she had once so desperately needed herself. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart."